What the frick is up, you guys? How are you guys doing? Good. Good. Glad everyone's good. So, everyone will be happy to know, because I know no one will be caring about my YouTube videos.
Even though I put so much McFreaking time and energy and effort into these videos, and no one gives a heck.
That's showbiz, baby. That's showbiz.
So, I decided to rebrand. Rebranding party. Let's brand ourselves. No. Let's not do that. So I decided to make my YouTube video be about psychology because I'm going to school for psychology. I want to be a prison psychologist. And so I thought it would be interesting to talk about different serial killers and murderers and stuff like that, and then try to put it into the psychological perspective. So this is kind of like my trial video. It's my very first video. I have a pretty not job of a case. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. I have a pretty interesting case on my hands, and I did a lot of research, and I want to share it with you guys. So I hope this new rebranding of mine goes well, and I hope you guys like these videos. Oh, quick disclaimer: I do briefly mention self-harm and animal abuse, so just a little heads up. Pazuzu Algarad was originally named John Alexander Lawson. He was born on August 12th, 1978 in San Francisco, California to Cynthia and Timothy Lawson. Him and his parents moved to Clemens, North Carolina, and in 1990, his mom and dad would end up getting divorced. I tried to look up why they got divorced. Couldn't really find anything. Some people claimed it was because of neglect and abuse and trauma and stuff on Pazuzu.
Sorry, that's his name.
But others said it was just because his dad was out of the picture. He was always in and out of jail. He had problems with drugs and alcohol. He never paid child support. So he was a really bad example for Pazuzu. In 1993, Cynthia would remarry someone named Johnny James. Very fancy if you ask me. But between 1990 and 1993, Pazuzu would not have a good or any fatherly figure. So this was about the time. He was 12 years old when his parents got divorced, by the way. So this was about the time where he was doing really bad in school. He made F's in every single class. He had to repeat the 2nd and 9th grade. And he was put into special ed classes, probably
for possible learning problems.
He would always get into trouble for skipping class, but he always denied being rude to teachers and authority. He denied getting into fights, vandalizing things, but he was just not a very good kid. But his mom and some of his classmates would describe him as charismatic, emotional, energetic. He was also a compulsive liar, so he would lie about everything. And so he would always tell his classmates he was from Iraq, his mom was a Satanist, his dad was a priest, or his dad was dead, just crazy things. And people would pay attention to him. So, of course, as a kid, this 12-year-old dude, he liked the attention. He wanted to fit in, he wanted to be accepted. People were paying attention to him. And so, personally, I think that this would be the start of the Pazuzu Algarad being born. This is just him as John Lawson before he's Pazuzu, but I think this would push him to do and become the person that he would become, if that makes sense. Even though Pazuzu denied using drugs, he did admit to start drinking alcohol when he was just 13 years old, and which is crazy. But I think because he saw his real dad, Timothy, do it when Cynthia and him are still married, it's the modeling principle. He just did what he saw someone else do. So he saw his dad do it and he was like, this is fun, I'm gonna do it. So he became an alcoholic at a super young age. And he also started harming animals at a very young age. And everyone know that do be a warning sign of something shady. He also indicated that he had agoraphobia, which is the fear of leaving one's home or the fear of going into crowded places. Which, if you have agoraphobia, then you most likely have anxiety. And he also had manic depression. He also had paranoid schizophrenia because, quote, I get paranoid that someone's out to get me, end quote. And this is kind of like a side note, but someone leaked his entire, okay, it's not funny. Someone leaked his entire psych evaluation on social media, and obviously it wasn't that hard to find, so I found a PDF of it. I read all of it. It was super long.
That's what she said.
But I read it, and another psychiatrist diagnosed him with schizotypal personality disorder, which the symptoms of that are like odd and eccentric behavior, paranoid ideation, unusual perceptual experiences, and excessive social anxiety. So he had a lot of things going on in his mind. Pazuzu had a lot of things going on in his brain. But because his mom couldn't afford therapy for him, he couldn't get the help that he needed. Personally, I truly believe that if he would have been able to go to therapy, a lot of his future stuff that he would get into could be avoided. Okay, here's where we get into the interesting part, the real interesting part. So, Pazuzu dropped out of school when he was 17 because he was uncomfortable in public places, probably due to his agoraphobia. And then in 2002, when he was 24, he legally changed his name to, you guessed it, Pazuzu Algrad. Pazuzu, or Paz for short. I might just call him that because I hate saying Pazuzu. But in ancient Mesopotamian mythology, Pazuzu was the king of the demons, and in the movie The Exorcist, which I've never seen, it was the demon that possessed one of the girls, the main girl, I don't know. And then I tried to find what Algrad meant, but all I found was it was an Arabic name, and I couldn't find the definition or like the not translation, but like, yeah, what it meant. And so, but the articles that I read didn't really focus on the Algrad part, mainly just the Pazuzu part of his name. All right, so John Lawson is now Pazuzu. Oh, and I forgot to mention, the town that they lived in, Clemens in North Carolina, was a pretty prominent Christian town. And so, of course, he had to become a Satanist. And so, he wanted to make up his own religion. Probably because he wanted attention, he wanted people to pay attention to him, blah, 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 all that, whatever, Pazuzu. So, in 2002, a year after the 9/11 attack, this part's really sad. He wanted to make people fear him. So he combined his made-up religion with Satanism plus Islam and terrorists, because at the time America was scared of Islam and terrorists because of the 9/11 attack. So he wanted people to fear him, which is not being a good thing. And Charles Manson, everyone knows who he is. He was like a cult leader in the 60s. He was one of his idols, like his biggest idol. And he really loved how Charles Manson had all these followers in his cult and how he got them to do whatever he wanted. So, like, if they got caught, he wouldn't get in trouble. And, like, honestly, that's pretty smart because Charles Manson literally did nothing. I mean, like, I'm in no way, like, supporting Charles Manson. Definitely not. But he did nothing. And he got away with so much. And people loved him so much that they were willing to take the blame for things that he was, like, manipulating them to do. Like, that's pretty smart. Like, that's psychopathic. Going back to the schizotypal personality disorder of his, Pazuzu filed his teeth to be sharp. So he like filed them down so they were sharp. And this is an example of um, a, an odd behavior. He also, dang, I'm like really itchy. He also split his tongue down in the middle, which I know people have done that, but it's still like kind of a unique thing. And he got a bunch of demonic tattoos like all over his body. And
You're gonna love this part.
Pazuzu said he only, I don't want to say it, it's so gross. He said he only bathed once, one time a year, and he hadn't brushed his teeth in years because personal hygiene, quote, stripped the body of its defenses in warding off infection and illness, end quote. So that's another bizarre belief that his brain came up with, and it's also pretty gross. For whatever reason, people were attracted to him. Okay? I'm talking about the outcast, the misfits, the socially excluded. They were drawn to him because he stood out and because they thought that he was like them. Okay, so going back to his mom, Cynthia, and his stepdad, Johnny James, they had bought a house together when they moved to North Carolina. The name was under, the house was under Cynthia's name. And the house would become known as the House of Horrors. And a House of Horrors it was. The house stood out from all the other houses in the neighborhood, mostly because it was disgusting. The door was painted jet black. There were satanic symbols on the door, like heavy metal band stickers, which that's not really. Nah. But there was also a sticker that said, or like someone wrote, "Evil will triumph" on it. So that's like a little weird.
Chloe.
Loud music blared from inside, and people from across the neighborhood could hear the music. Like it was that loud. And okay, here's where it gets gross. The walls were so moldy. There was blood smeared on the walls. Hundreds of dead and living flies were in the house. And every time someone opened the door, like a bunch would just like swarm out. That's like disgusting. People practiced demonic rituals there, stuff like that, like normal stuff that people would do inside of a house. And here's the best part of it. The best part. The house was filled with poop and pee in the corners. Because my guess is that they couldn't afford running water. So they were just like, let's go to the bathroom in the corner. But I feel like there was a smarter way that they could have done that. But then they didn't. Oh, and Cynthia and Johnny, they had moved out of the house. They moved somewhere else. So Pazuzu lived there. And Pazuzu said the house had no rules at all. It was just do whatever you want, whenever you want, do whoever you want, whenever you want. Multiple orgies took place there all the time. A lot of the activities done in the house included self-harm. They would drink blood from birds. They would drink blood from each other. Sounds like a fun icebreaker. Let's drink each other's blood. They performed rabbit sacrifices. They performed a bunch of animal sacrifices, and they did many drugs. They had many orgies, and pretty much all of the people in the house were drug addicts. And Pazuzu let them do drugs in the house. He was like,
I don't give a heck. I don't even care.
and he did drugs with them as well. So, of course, the people doing drugs there are going to come back because they're like, hey, this guy's letting us do drugs in this house. We love him. We love his house. So, it was a good Christian time. Another beautiful thing about Pazuzu's Christian home was the decor. I already mentioned the poop and pee. That really brought the whole room together. But there was also animal carcasses, animal cages, trash, alcohol. It smelled like body odor and alcohol, and it smelled like, bathroom stuff.
So it pretty much smelled like a Victoria's Secret perfume.
Pazuzu was a little bit of a player. He pretty much slept with any girl anyone he came in contact with. He didn't even care. He was like,
If it is alive, then sign me up.
at least he wasn't a necrophiliac, okay? At least he wasn't a necrophiliac. But he had multiple girl followers, and once he realized that these young girls, not young like children young, but young like early 20s and stuff, he realized that he could manipulate them like Charles Manson, our good old friend Charles, manipulated his girl followers. And he referred to his girl followers as his fiancées. He had 2 extra special fiancées that stood out to him, Amber Birch and Crystal Matlock. This kind of goes hand in hand with Pazuzu's compulsive lying, but this time it was a little bit not lying. So it was just compulsive telling the truth. He told all the people in his house, all of his followers, that he was a murderer, he was a cannibal. He had buried dead bodies in his backyard. He had a dead body in the basement. And of course, everyone's high on meth and heroin, and they're like,
It's so funny, Pazuzu. You're so hilarious. Let me have sex with you.
so no one took him seriously. But they would later come to find out, but probably not because they were still high, that he was actually telling the truth. Okay, so in 2010, Pazuzu is 32 at the time, and he's arrested for being connected to the murder of Joseph Emmerich Chandler, whose body was found in the Yadkin River, which is where Pazuzu was allegedly seen practicing black magic and doing animal sacrifices. And the guy that shot Chandler, his name is Nicholas. He was a friend of Pazuzu's, and so obviously he went to jail because letbut then Pazuzu went to jail because he was an accessory to the murder, and he was letting Nicholas, the murder suspect, stay at his house, and he told the police, oh, I don't know where this dude's at, but secretly he's in the house full of the poop and pee house. So after that, he gets let out he was in jail, so he couldn't be a cannibal. He couldn't let himself go in jail. So he gets let out. Then in 2011, he's 33. He's convicted. I put convinced. Oh no. He's convicted of assault on his mother, dear old Cynthia, for choking her until she passes out. So then she wakes up and she calls the police, and they're like, do you want to press charges? And she's like, no, he's my son. And they're like, okay. So nothing happens. They let him go again. Then, after this, the police keep an eye on him because they're like, something's a little suspicious about Pazuzu over here. So they get a search warrant, and they search his house, and they're trying to investigate the backyard of the House of Horrors, but they don't have evidence because someone said that there were dead bodies buried in the backyard. Remember, Pazuzu told every one of his followers that there were dead bodies in the backyard, and they were like,
You're so hot, Pazuzu. I love how you don't shower, because I don't shower either.
And so the police don't have evidence of this anonymous tip. So they don't know where to look, and then they leave the house, the poop and pee house. They leave the poop and pee house, aka the House of Horrors. In 2014, Pazuzu has aged. He's grown up. He's now 36, and many anonymous tips came into the police, and people were even calling his mother, dear old Cynthia, saying that something was going on in the House of Horrors and the poop and pee house. And so this gives the police probable cause to get a search warrant to again search the House of Horrors. So they go back and they search the backyard, and they find the 2 dead bodies that Pazuzu was talking about. The bodies would be later identified as Joshua Wetzler and Tommy Welch. And there was no known association to them. There was no known association to them, to Pazuzu or the house. And so I read that Pazuzu kept them in his basement, like not at the same time, but remember when he told his followers that he was keeping a body in his basement? Well, he was telling the truth, my friends. He was telling the truth again. So he would keep them in the basement one at a time for a few days. He wouldn't give them food or water, and then he would shoot them on the couch.
Covey Part 2.
Now, remember one of his fiancées, Amber Birch, dear old Amber? She would get arrested for being found guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Tommy Welch. And then remember dear old Crystal Matlock? Well, she was accused of helping bury and dismember Josh Wetzler. And so both of their bodies would be dismembered, and then they would bury them in the backyard. Welch and Wetzler's bodies had been buried for about 5 years until they were found. Wetzler was last seen in 2009, but wasn't reported missing until 2010. And then Welch was also last seen in 2009, and I believe he was reported as a missing person in 2009 as well. So after all of this goes down, the country officials say this house is unfit for human habitation. We're going to tear it down. We're going to tear this baby down. And so since her name is like in the lease, on the lease, however homeownership works, it's her name. They're like, hey, we're going to give you 30 days to pay this fee or your house is going to be destroyed. And I'm wondering, like, either she probably didn't have enough money to pay for it, because I don't know how much the fee was, but like I do know houses be expensive, because as a homeowner myself, I can say that. But at the same time, I'm also wondering, like, did she want it to be torn down because she saw what her son had become and what he turned into? And maybe she was thinking, like, if this house gets torn down, maybe dear old John Lawson would change his ways, and like, I don't know. It doesn't say, so I can't like assume anything. But in 2014, Pazuzu is still 36. He gets arrested for the 3rd time because one of his loyal followers, Charles Manson's followers would never. I'm kidding. But one of his followers calls the police and tells them what's going on. And they're like, okay, Pazuzu Algrad needs to be arrested. So they arrest him. And then in May 2015, he's 37. He gets transferred to central prison, to a central prison in another place in North Carolina because of a safekeeping order. Because of his mental illnesses, he gets transferred to a different prison. This is where the story ends. Some of you are like,
Thank goodness, if anyone's watching.
Pazuzu committed suicide on October 28th, 2015 in his jail cell. And the cause of death was basically he like cut his arm, and the wound was really deep, and he cut like a major blood vessel, and so he like bled out and he died. And kind of rude and sad because the families of the victims of Welch and Wetzler, they like didn't get closure. Like he just killed himself. And a lot of people are like, "Oh, suicide is the coward's way out," or like stuff like that. Which suicide is never the answer, people. It's never the answer. Never ever 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 ever. But he committed suicide, and he probably just did it cuz he was about to die anyway, and he was like, "I don't even care. I have like nothing to live for anymore," which is so sad because I mean, even though he was like a murderer and stuff, still that's just so sad to me. So that's the end of Pazuzu Algrad. Now to add some of my own thoughts about it, even though I've been doing that throughout the whole thing, I was thinking about it. So first, when I first heard this story, the first thing that I thought of was like, it doesn't make any sense how he had agoraphobia, but he had all these people in his house. And like, agoraphobia is the fear of crowded places, but it's also the fear of leaving one's home. So I'm thinking like, but he never left his home. And all of these people were like similar to him. They were all like messed up as well. So it does kind of make sense now that I thought about it with my brain. And also, I don't think Pazuzu would be considered a serial killer because one, he only killed two people. Well, he only killed two people that the police found. Like he only killed two known people. Maybe he killed more, I don't know. But he only killed two people and it was at the same location. And to be considered a serial killer,
You guys probably already know this, but I'm gonna tell you because I know it as well.
to be considered a serial killer, you have to kill three plus people in different locations at different times. So he didn't do that. I also was thinking about this. I'll just leave you guys with this. I was also thinking about how how Pazuzu's actions related to his mental illnesses, and like a lot of psychologists, like the question that they want to know is why, right? That's like the $1,000,000 question is why. But what I want to know is how are his illnesses related to his actions? Because if someone has a mental illness, their actions are going to reflect the illness most of the time. And he had pretty big ones. Like he had paranoid schizophrenia and I did it again. Schizotypal personality disorder. And those are very like distinct things. But I just don't understand how his actions related to that. Like that's what I'm having trouble with. And I've only taken 2 psychology classes so far, but I just don't want to know how.
You know, like, what the heck? What the frick?